So in this lecture, we all are just discussing the complication of the peptic ulcer diseases. So there are three major complications: perforations, hemorrhage, and stenosis. Okay, so first we already had little bit discussion about the perforations, duodenal perforation or gastric perforations. Uh, Usually, the previously before invention of these anti-secretory drugs like H2 blocker and PPIs, the incidence were very common, but nowadays incidence is reduced to very limited because these anti-secretory drugs are very much helpful in controlling the conditions so that perforations now occurs very rarely. Nowadays, the most common cause of the perforation is not that peptic ulcers, but the use of the NSAIDs, the overuse or the misuse. So that is the main reason nowadays for the perforations. We have already had discussed that in duodenal, the common site for that perforation is anterior ulcer, while the posterior ulcer are more tends to bleed. Okay, so the clinical feature includes that a patient with long history of peptic ulcer disease suddenly uh, suddenly felt severe pain that within few hours that pain is generalized to the abdomen and complete abdomen is rigid and hard and there is no movement with the respirations. Patient cannot move because the severe pain means the symptom of that. This is the sign of peritonitis. That is two peritoneum in abdominal cavity, the visceral peritoneum and parietal peritoneum. So whenever the visceral peritoneum is inflamed, then it causes the infections so that the parietal peritoneum also get inflamed. When the parietal peritoneum get inflamed, then that the abdominal wall becomes straight and rigid to guard to protect that peritoneum because if the movement occurs in the abdominal wall, then the peritoneum moves, and when the peritoneum moves, then that causes the severe pain to the patient. That's why the patient with the peritonitis, that is severe inflammation in the parietal peritoneum, that's a patient unable to move, just lying very straight. Along with this, later on, that patient, when the infection is spread to the blood circulatory system, then the cause septicemia. Later on, that's why the fever is not come in the early symptom. Fever comes later. Later, when the septicemia established. Some patients may have some unusual presentation like dull aching pain in the right abdomen and the weakness in the lower lower limbs, thighs, and later on that after 24 or 48 hours, patient may develop this general peritonitis and that uh, and the pain in that peritonitis and the features of the septicemia. Understand? So the initial symptom is the pain in abdomen suddenly which spreads and causes the peritonitis and so these are the clinical features which occurs in that perforation of the duodenal ulcer, gastric ulcer, or in the uh, any condition which involve the peritonitis. The intestinal perforations also may cause that the similar features. The investigations, the initially that the X-ray, if you have the facility of the X-ray, then erect X-ray shows that there is a gas under the diaphragm. It means there is a perforation in the duodenal ulcer and in the or the gastric ulcers. Usually there is no gas in the right side below the diaphragm. CT is more accurately shows the site of that obstructions. Along with these radiological features, that elevated serum amylase and the altered serum electrolytes. So that or the some supportive investigations. Treatment includes, first thing, the early detection of the conditions. So if your patient, you are suspecting any patient that he or she might have that perforations, so start a resuscitation immediately. And the first thing you should do, just starting oral fluid. Patient should be nailed orally and no nothing given from the mouth. Instead, one NG tube, nasogastric tube, also called the Ryle's tube, can be should be put in the stomach through nose, and all the content of the stomach uh, should be aspirated. So that causes the reduce the gastric distension and removing that the part in the that acids in the stomach, which may cause the severe damage to the other part when we leak through the perforation and come to the peritoneal cavity. So it can damage other body parts. So start the nasogastric sections nil per oral. Give the adequate analgesia, either opioid or non-opioid, and the broad spectrum antibiotics along with these fluid resuscitations, because patient may be in shock. Either in the initially patient may be in the shock due to the pain, and later on the patient may be shocked due to the septicemic conditions. Okay, so first thing, just start IV fluids and nil per oral your patients. Nothing should be given from mouth. Start NG tube suction and give analgesia, broad spectrum antibiotics. Then when your patient settles, means when your patient is stable, you are covering with antibiotics, covering the septicemia by the antibiotics and the anti-inflammatory drugs. Then when your patient is stable and patient can afford that anesthesia, then surgical repair is the ultimate treatment. If perforation cannot be treated by the medicines, okay, so you have to do that surgical repair. So that is for the surgical repair, laparotomy is the good options. Just open from the midline incisions. Before doing this, identification of the perforation site is very important. So if you have in the facility of the endoscopy, so before laparotomy, endoscopy may be very helpful to find the exact site of the perforation. If you know the exact site of the perforation, the time and duration of the procedure is very less. Just open with the midline laparotomy and find that site of that perforation and close that perforation with that multiple non-absorbable sutures. That suture should be given the transverse, just like in the pyloroplasty. So that causes that avoid the causing the stricture formation. So the perforation should be closed with the multiple sutures. Suture should be tension free. There should be no extra. Should be means all the sutures should be placed just to approximate the edges of that wound, not to give the tensions. That may cause the tearing and the leakage. That's why. If the effect is big, then omental patch should be placed over the perforation after that suturing, so that it guard that area and it reduces the leakage in futures. So in the case of that big duodenal ulcer, simultaneously the Billroth second may be performed to remove that part of that stomach, two-third part of the stomach, and gastrojejunostomy should be performed. After that, surgical procedures, long-time PPI and eradication therapy should be advised to the patient to avoid the recurrence of that conditions. And some authors suggest that patient with a very minimal perforation, very tiny perforation, which have very mild symptoms, that can be treated with the conservatively also with the broad spectrum antibiotics and the oral nil parole. All the management is same. If you are found that the perforation is very tiny, so it can heal also itself. So whatever just you have to do, just give take the patient oral nil and ng suction and suction by ng tube, so that it gets enough time to heal, and so that that defect will be closed itself also, but it's very rare conditions. Instead of doing the open laparotomy, laparoscopy is also may be performed. But the problem is that, okay, one more thing I just forget to share, that is after the closing of that defect, toileting of that abdominal cavity is very much important. Toileting means the cleaning of the abdominal cavity, because the gastric content comes into the abdominal cavity and it's all over the abdomen. So you have to clean all the abdomen. Just pour 2 to 3 normal saline, 2 bottle normal saline, and just pour in the abdominal cavity. In that you can mix some betadine solutions, and you just rinse the intestine, and then you, with suction you wash that. Suck complete that solution, antibiotic solution and normal saline. So by doing this 3 to 4 times, you completely clean the abdominal cavity, so that or any material, any infected material should not be there to cause the inflammation of that part. So toileting of that abdominal cavity is very important. The problem with the laparoscopy is that the toileting is not proper. That's why always for that perforation, open laparotomy is better to perform. Next complication, the bleeding. So the bleeding can be 2 types, that hematemesis and the melena. Blood comes from the mouth or blood comes from the anus. So out of this, you can see that ulcer has 60% of that. GI bleeding, erosions cause 26%, malarious tear 4%, esophageal varices 4%, tumor 0.5%, Delphi disease 0.5%, and other diseases are 5%. So here the most common cause of the GI bleeding are the ulcers. Out of this, the duodenal ulcer is 33%, and gastric ulcer 21%, and esophageal ulcers are 6%. So to control that, to control this GI bleeding, first you should resuscitate your patients and assess the patient, assess the bleeding, how much the blood patient has lost, and from where the blood is coming. So if you have to assess these conditions, and then resuscitate the patient with IV fluid or the blood transfusion if required. And if it is mild, then you just go with the hemocoagulative drugs like tranexamic acid, and some other drugs can be used to increase the coagulability of the blood, so that the oozing or bleeding can be stopped. But if it is not respond with the medical treatment, then surgical treatment is the only options. So the GI endoscopy should be performed as early as the patient is stable. First, you make the patient is stable hemodynamically, and then as the availability is there, the endoscopies should be performed. In the case of the hematemesis, you can find the source of the bleeder. At the same time, you can best suture it and ligate it to control. In extreme condition, if you have not accessed these kind of services, and you have the Sangstein black marrow tube. So with this Sangstein black marrow tube, we already had discussed in the esophageal varices. For the temporary management of that bleeding, just infiltrate the balloon of that Sangstein black marrow tube, so that it can infiltration create the pressure on the wall of that stomach as well as the duodenum, so that the bleeding may be controlled for few hours. Later on, the definitive surgical management can be done later. Okay, so means the assessment of the patient and the initial resuscitation is very important to share the life of the patient. Later on, the surgical management can be planned either by the endoscopy or the open laparotomy to find that first site of that suture, of the bleeding, and then later you can control it. So the surgical treatment is in that hematemesis or the melena is that first, the criteria for the patient taken for the surgery is that patient is not responding to the medical treatment and patient is continuously bleeding. So the aim should be to stop the bleeding. Our aim, because the blood is, if patient lose so much blood, it's very difficult to recover that. So the blood is, we first our first aim should be to stop the bleeding. So the in case of the duodenal ulcer, the common site for the bleeding is the ulcer in the posterior wall. And the duodenal ulcers, where the lesser curvature and the greater curvature, they can cause the bleeding. So the treatment should be just either by the laparotomy, just midline incision, open, mobilize the duodenum and give and longitudinal incision in the duodenum and in the anterior wall, and just see the site of the oozing or site of the bleeding, site of the ulcer. Then you just put some suture to underrun that ulcers, so that the arteries or the vessels which was bleeding from the ulcers, you can control that bleeding by doing this underrun suture over the ulcers. So by this and after that closing the ulcers, the bleeding is stopped. Then you close the duodenum by the similar manner in the pyloroplasty. Means you have to close that ulcers, the incision over the duodenum transversely. Okay, so the similar procedure is applied for the duodenal ulcer, either for the gastric ulcer. Just go open from the anterior side and see the site of the bleeding and put some suture that underrun in the wall of that ulcer in the wall of the stomach, and so that you can ligate that bleeding vessels. So by doing this, you have to stop the bleeding first, then you close that. If you are suspecting any ulcer that is not typical and having some features that could you suspect that there may be the ulcers are malignant, so at the same time you have to take the biopsy of some smart piece of that tissue. We have to take from that ulcer for that histopathological examination to confirm any kind of the malignancy, and then close the incision. So by doing this, our aim is to stop the bleeding by just putting some sutures underrun the ulcers. Next complication, the stenosis, gastric outlet obstructions, means that obstruction in the pylorus part of that stomach or in the first part of the duodenum. So the most common cause of the gastric outlet obstruction is the gastric cancer and the pyloric stenosis secondary to the duodenal ulcers. Means this gastric outlet obstruction is usually caused by two conditions. First condition, that gastric carcinoma, and the second condition is the pyloric stenosis caused by the duodenal ulcers. Because when the ulcers are very deep and when the ulcers heal, they are and deep and involve the muscular layer. So after the healing of the ulcer, the scarring, they cause the fibrosis in the muscular wall. So there's called the stricture, and that causes the narrowing in the wall of the duodenum and the first part of the duodenum. So pyloric stenosis usually is a misnomer. Means pyloric stenosis is not usually means that occur in the pylorus part of the stomach, but it usually present in the first part of the duodenum. Understand? But it is the term is used for the same. True stenosis occurs after the fibrosis around the pyloric channel after the healing of the ulcer. We already discussed when the ulcer heals, it causes the fibrosis that causes the shrinkage of the wall. If there is the duodenal ulcer in the both side, anterior and posterior side, then very much chance to develop the pyloric stenosis. The clinical feature of the pyloric stenosis involve that vomiting is the very characteristic features. In the benign conditions, usually patient have long-term history of the peptic ulcer disease, while the malignant conditions may be silent. Okay, so if the patient has the history of peptic ulcer disease and now the patient suffering from that characteristic projectile vomiting, and the vomitus does not contain the bile, it means whatever the vomitus is coming from the stomach only, that means the patient may have that pyloric stenosis. Along with this characteristic feature of that vomitus and vomiting, patient may also exhibit loss of the weight, dehydrations, patient looks ill, suction splash. Suction splash is the fluid. Just like if we keep some fluid in the bottle and when we shake it, then the one kind of sound is there after that the fluid. The similar sound can be audible in the stomach, because whatever the gastric secretions and the patient taking the fluid, that remains only the stomach, it not passing from the stomach to the duodenum, because there is causing stenosis. So you can hear the suction splash by the shaking the patient's abdomen. So the suction splash, loss of weight, dehydration, the ill look of patient, these all collectively things suggest the patient may have pyloric stenosis. That may be due to that. If the patient has history of pyloric ulcer disease, then most commonly it is due to the pyloric stenosis. If the patient doesn't have this kind of history, it means the patient may have the malignancy. Some other the metabolic effect also occur the metabolic effect of the pyloric stenosis also, that causes the severe electrolyte imbalance, because the renal dysfunctions that may be visible as the acidic urine and the hypokalemia that may leads to the tetany, because the secretions of that stomach are there, and there is the dehydration causing the alteration in the electrolyte, so that causes the imbalance in electrolytes. So that's why this hypokalemia and other things happen. The management, the principal management is the first to correct the metabolic abnormalities, that is hypokalemia and this acidic urine and the electrolyte imbalance. So for that and the second thing is the mechanical obstruction. So to tackle the first thing, to tackle the metabolic abnormalities, you should take the patient in the IV line, and you have to rehydrate the patient with a good amount of the fluid, and you stop doing anything from the oral, means patient should be a nil per oral, and the to correct abnormalities, some lactate should be given. That means to correct that electrolyte imbalance, good amount of the IV fluid should do, and correct amount of the IV fluid should be given to the patients. Along with this, that NG tube should be placed to start the gastric lavage, and gastric lavage, because there is the obstruction, you may found the food of the patient who has taken very long time ago, and that remain in the stomach and not passing from that stomach to the duodenum. So that's why gastric lavage, the complete cleaning of the stomach is required by the NG tube. Just to pour some normal saline, half liter through the NG tube, push in the stomach, and then suck complete fluid, then again push, then again suck. So by doing this, you have to clean the complete stomach. After that, cleaning the stomach, After cleaning the stomach, by endoscopy, you can directly visualize the obstruction, means that the, the extent of the obstructions, and you may find if there is any mass that may be due to that uh, malignancy, or you find the stricture due to the duodenal ulcers. So if they suspect any mass, then take that biopsy, take some tissue from there. So you can visualize that the amount and extent of the obstructions. Along with this, uh, you can means you can decide what kind of treatment you are going to advise your patients. If the obstruction is only minimal, and then mechanical dilation by that ballooning by the endoscopic, that method, it can be utilized to the patients. But it may also has some complication while the ballooning, while stretching of that the constricted part, it may be perforate and cause the injury. So but if it is not minimal, it is severe, then surgical operation is the only treatment. That includes the pyloroplasty or the gastroenterostomy, means that removing that part of the duodenum, and then anastomosis of this, anastomosis of that stomach to the jejunum, and that part should be remain closed, the stomach of the duodenum. So that's similar to the we do in the Bell's second procedures. Understand? And if you find that stenosis or the obstruction is due to the malignancy, then the treatment should be given as the malignancy, that we have to remove the complete part of the stomach as well as the duodenum, and then Roux-en-Y diversion, Roux-en-Y loop should gastrojejunostomy or the gastroenterostomy should be performed. So along with this, with these complications, uh, first perforations, hemorrhage, and stenosis. These are three major complications that occurs after the peptic ulcer diseases. So we should always keep in mind these complications. So here we have just to finish this topic, gastric ulcer, and the next topic, the next class, we just